Hello, and welcome to this special McGill News webcast, The Torch Burns Bright. My name is Derek Cassoff, Managing Director of Communications at McGill's Office of University Advancement. The 2024 Summer Olympics are just a few days away. Thousands of athletes from around the world have descended on Paris, some with high hopes for Olympic medals, others just thrilled to represent their countries on the world's biggest sporting stage. McGill University has had a long tradition of involvement with the Olympics, dating back to the 1904 Summer Games in St. Louis, where the legendary Percival Molson competed for Canada in track and field. Since then, McGill students and alumni have won a combined total of 32 Olympic medals, including a dozen gold. Overall, 145 McGill students and alumni have competed at the Summer and Winter Olympics. Today, we sit down with two of them as they reflect on their Olympic experiences and talk about how their participation in the Games went on to shape their personal and professional lives. Let me introduce them. Douglas Vandor is a two-time McGill graduate with a bachelor's degree in physiology and a master's degree in experimental surgery. He is also a champion rower who competed for Canada at the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing and again at the 2012 Games in London. He also served as a Team Canada Athletic Services Officer as well as unofficial chef and baker, I believe, at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. Today, he lives in Vancouver, where he raises his family, writes children's books, and continues to cook on occasion. And Jeane Lassen is a former competitive weightlifter who has a McGill education degree, majoring in teaching English as a second language. A native of Whitehorse, in 2008, she became the first female athlete from the Yukon to compete at the Summer Olympics, finishing in fifth place in her weight category. 4 years later, sidelined by a back injury, she returned to the Olympics as a member of the coaching team for Christine Girard when she became Canada's first ever Olympic champion in weightlifting. Jeane would return to the Olympics once more at the 2018 Winter Games in Pyeongchang as an athlete mentor. Today, she works as a clinical counselor in Whitehorse and is a proud member of the Yukon Sports Hall of Fame. Thank you both for joining me today to share some of your Olympic stories with us. So,
Thanks for having me.
Great. Let's begin by learning a bit more about each of you, each of our guests, and your Olympic journeys. Douglas, maybe I'll start with you if that's all right. I understand that you grew up as a competitive speed skater and only began rowing when you were at McGill in your early 20s. How did you first come to the sport of rowing, and how did you manage to parlay that late start into a pair of Olympic berths?
Well, like a lot of things in life, is you imagine things and you have maybe a plan, but when opportunities present themselves, take advantage of them. And I was always loved sports when I was young. I was born and raised in Quebec, and I wanted to go to the Olympics. I had a dream of going to the Olympics, and speed skating was popular in Quebec, so I started speed skating. But then when I got to university age, I applied to University of Calgary and McGill University, and they screwed up my application in Calgary. My idea was if I went to Calgary, I'd continue training at the Oval. But because they screwed up my application and I was accepted at McGill, I'm like, it's a good school, I'll go to McGill. But I had to stop the speed skating because I was a long tracker. So I was training in Quebec City, and they didn't have an oval in Montreal. And so after a year or two of not training, I began to miss that sort of adrenaline that you get every day training. And I saw on campus people with the McGill crew jackets. And it was actually because I liked the McGill crew jackets that I was like, I think I'll try out for rowing. And I tried out for it and became addicted to it immediately. And it sort of took off from there.
Wow, interesting story. And I guess University of Calgary's misfortune became Team Canada's good fortune. Great to hear that.
Exactly, exactly.
Always interesting to hear how these sort of back end stories or origin stories develop. Jeannie, I'm sure you probably have a very interesting one as well. Can you tell us what it was like growing up as an aspiring athlete in a place as remote as the Yukon, which, as I mentioned before, had never produced a female summer Olympian until you came on the scene? And did your athletic dreams play any part in your decision to pursue your academic career here at McGill?
Yeah, I grew up. My mom had me super young when she was 16, so I was pretty sidelined from organized sport at a young age. We just didn't have the finances to put me into organized sport. So I was at the right age in 1988 when there was the summer and winter Olympics the same year. So Calgary Olympics in '88 really like drew me in, and I was like, I want to be an Olympian, even though I was involved in zero sports. I was like, put me in. And I just really like tried hard in gym class because of it. I was a bit of a, like, I'd say a kamikaze on the green belt of my trailer court, always playing hard with the other kids. So when I went to junior high, there was like free school sports. So I kind of joined everything possible. And the weightlifting club at my school was like on the stage. So the weightlifting coach saw me being a bit of a kamikaze, and he got a couple of my other coaches, my track and field coach and my basketball coach in grade seven. The two of them joined forces with my weightlifting coach, or who became my weightlifting coach, and he said, "Hey, I see that you have some athletic ability. You're a good athlete. You should try weightlifting. It will make you jump higher, run faster, be more agile." And I wanted so badly to identify as an athlete, like that. When he called me an athlete, I was like, oh my God, this is my dream come true. So I tried out weightlifting, no aspiration of being a weightlifter. I just wanted to be better at the sports I was already doing. And one of them was soccer at the time. I was on the Yukon soccer team by that point. And yeah, so I just did it to advance my sports career. And then right place, right time. It was the early 90s, a good time for a girl to get involved in weightlifting. So I made the national team quite young, and it was hard to get out of the Yukon at that time, like a lot of barriers to travel, but did a lot of garbage pickups, a lot of recycling collections, and was back then $1,100 just to get to Vancouver, if you can imagine. So a lot of my training was fundraising. So yeah, we did have an Olympian in '92, Lucy Steele, who came to my class, and it's a small community, so I'd see her in the streets, and she was always encouraging me. So I was very lucky to have an awesome community around me, pushing me to go south and compete.
And then when you came to McGill, I guess that sort of must have dovetailed with you sort of the run up to your Olympic appearance. So a lot of focus on training as well as studies at the same time.
Yeah, I think like for Yukon athletes, it was long an expectation that if you wanted to advance your career, you had to move south after high school. And for myself, like the national team was all from Quebec. So going to McGill made a lot of sense. Also, a school that we heard about a lot up north. So going, like studying just went hand in hand. Like working is way less flexible than being a student. So that was just like no question what athletes on the national team do. It's in weightlifting, anyways, because we don't have to train overseas. We can be here in Canada or wherever we're studying. Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility in the sport of weightlifting in terms of like the facility required. So for that reason, I was okay being up in the north completely on my own. I had a shack that I had to start a fire and warm up before I could go and train, but like very low barrier, the sport. And that's why it's competed in throughout the world, over 100 countries participating. So.
Wow. And Douglas, I'm curious in your case, I mean, your Olympic appearance came first of two appearances came long after you had graduated from McGill, but I assume you used your time at McGill, crew jackets aside, to actually prepare your career along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I had a good varsity career at McGill, but my first experience with the Olympics was actually 2004 in Athens, because shortly after finishing my master's degree, I wrapped it up quickly so I could move out to Victoria, where the Olympic team trains, and that was in 2001. And then, so my aspirations were to make the national team right away in preparation for 2004. And I actually was able to do that. And I'm a lightweight rower, so there's not as many boat classes in lightweight rowing. And so at the time, I was a sweeper, which means that I had one large oar, like the athletes in the eight, they each have one oar, as opposed to sculling, where you have two smaller oars, like in a single. And the event was the lightweight four. And so in 2002, a year after moving to Victoria, I made the Olympic class boat, and we medaled for the first time. We won the World Cup in Lucerne in Switzerland, which was the first time ever that had happened. And we medaled at the World Championships, which was the first time ever that a lightweight four had medaled at the World Championships. And so that was great motivation for Athens, which was 2 years away. The following year, 2003, I was also in the boat, and we qualified the boat for Athens, because it's the year before the Olympics that you qualify at the World Championships. And then the preparation year for Athens, we had a change of coaching, and he actually made us do some sculling in singles, which I had never done before. And because I had grit, but I didn't have the technique in the skull. It contributed to one of the common injuries that we get, which are stress fractures in the rib, which is just putting pressure on the ribs and they just can't take the pressure anymore and they snap. And so it's you break a bone, so it's quite a long journey. It's like 6 weeks to heal, and if you go back too soon, you keep re-injuring it. And so I had a difficult year that year before Athens, and all the testing that we did to get back into the boat, because it is indeed the boat that qualifies, not the athletes. I was never up to par where I should have been. The testing was all done correctly, but as an athlete, because I had been injured that year and probably came back too soon each time because I was eager to get back to training, I wasn't selected to go into the boat. So I was a spare at the Athens Olympics. So it was my first taste as a spare. And then after that, I was able to probably manage more the injuries and what should be done as you learn, as you mature as an athlete, and then continued from there.
Right. All right. So let's fast forward to today. We're on the eve, the cusp of the 2024 Paris Olympics. I'm curious as to how significant these next 2 weeks are going to be for each of you as former Olympians. So will you be glued to your television sets the next 2 weeks, or is there sort of a bittersweet approach to this in terms of tuning in now that you're retired from competition? Jeannie, maybe I'll start with you. How do you approach these?
Um, I'm pretty excited because I will be glued to my television set for the opening ceremonies because I'll be here in the Yukon, but I am going to be in Paris. I'm heading over on August 1st. I mentioned my mom having me quite young. She also became involved in weightlifting because of me. Being from such a small jurisdiction, she became a member of Yukon weightlifting, automatically a member of Canadian weightlifting, was attending all these competitions, so she became a referee, and she actually ended up going to the Olympics as a technical official. And these Olympics, she's the first ever technical delegate, so she's like the highest up technical official for weightlifting at the games. So I'll be going there to support her. I actually have some accreditation because of that. So I'll be able to watch a pile of weightlifting, and the accreditation I have is actually going to allow me to watch all of the other sports as well. So I'm going to be right in the thick of it, and I'm really excited to cheer on Team Canada and support my mom doing something really cool and giving back to our sport in a different way.
Oh, that's what a great story. And then you won't need your television to watch the Olympics. That's great.
No, just the opening. I won't be there for the start, but yeah.
Right. And how about you, Douglas? How do you approach sort of games now that you're retired from the competitions?
I love it. And it's like in our house, it's the only time the TV is allowed to be on like 24/7. And with two young kids, um, and my wife as well, who loves watching it, it's nice to see it through my kids' eyes as well. They're 7 and 9, and they're quite active and athletic, and so they get all excited about it. And so it's sort of like watching it all over again. I'm excited to begin with, but seeing them excited about it makes me excited as well. And so, and I still know a lot of the people, having stayed involved with Rowing Canada over the years since my retirement in 2013, and the COC, where I, as you mentioned, went over to Russia and was also the chef de mission in Lima at the Pan Am Games in 2019. I still know a lot of people in the system, so it's quite exciting to see them and cheer them on from home.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do your kids know who their father is? Do they know
Uh,
that you're a
he's
former
the guy
Olympian?
that, yeah, he's the guy that cleans the toilet and makes the lunches.
With that Olympic background, of course.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Sounds familiar. So tell me what the athletes that are competing for Canada and for other countries at these upcoming Olympics are going through right now. Like each of you, they've trained so hard these last 4 years, dedicating so much of their lives to this one moment of Olympic glory. What must be going through their minds other than stress? Jeannie, what would you surmise?
I think they're doing their best to enjoy the process and like acknowledging that it is a very, very not normal experience they're going through, but trying to maintain that feeling of normalcy while going through it, right? Like, that this is what they've trained for forever, but you want to feel all of the moments, as tricky as that can be, because that's what you'll look back on in the future is like overcoming those moments of stress and overwhelm sometimes and extreme excitement and trying to be able to sleep when you know opening ceremonies are the next day, just being as present as possible and feeling like yourself while you're going through it is my experience and what I suspect, like having talked to most athletes, that's what they're navigating.
Right. And now, Douglas, I mean, you went to, I guess, one Olympic as a spare, and you competed in two. How did your approach change at all once you were sort of like, I've been here before, now I've learned how to approach things differently than maybe I did the first go round?
Well, I think you're pretty focused and you've been working hard and waiting for this moment for a long time. But I think you can't forget as well that you're always sort of competing, and you're competing against the same people, whether it's the Olympics, a World Cup, or World Championships. And the Olympics are special because it is every 4 years, but you develop a routine and you're constantly tweaking that routine to improve it and stuff. And so these athletes now in Paris are focused. They know what they have to do. The day's sort of programmed out hour by hour, and so they've sat down with all the people around them, their team, their coaches, their physios and their dietitians and stuff, and it's about executing a plan and being a bit flexible in case things change, but it can seem in a good way pretty mundane because you know exactly what you have to do, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. So that's actually a really great segue into the next question I had, which is this notion of sort of being in the Olympic spotlight, this one moment out of 4 years. I know you both competed in sports that are, I guess, a bit under the radar in terms of most casual fans who don't necessarily follow rowing or weightlifting on a daily or weekly basis. And yet, as you mentioned, Douglas, there are regular tournaments and competitions and world championships that are consuming your schedules and calendars. So I'm just wondering, like, did either of you find it maybe frustrating sometimes that people only really paid attention to your accomplishments and your achievements just at one time every 4 year period? Jeannie, you want to jump on that first?
Sure, yeah. I think, yeah, it's tricky that, for some Canadians, well, I think a lot of Canadians, weightlifting is not on the radar, although CrossFit has shifted that a little bit. I think, but it is what makes it special, right? Just like Canada Games, all of those multi-sport games where the spotlight is drawn to the sport, whereas it normally isn't, is it's like an opportunity. So trying to seize it as an opportunity rather than sadness that feeling that maybe people don't care the rest of the time, because I'm sure that in rowing it's the same when you go to these competitions in other countries. The fan base is very different than here in Canada. So just seeing that these spectators and fans have a chance to be drawn into the magic of competition is like what I rather focus on than kind of grieve that it's not like that all the time.
Right. And what about you, Douglas? I know as a casual fan, I always love watching the rowing in the Olympics. I don't have no idea what the sport's about, 364 days of the year, but in the moment, it's such an exciting, race to experience.
Yeah, and I think the fans, I don't think they don't care the rest of the time. I just think there's not always the opportunities on TV to watch it, or you don't know where to find it and stuff. But I think, the athletes, you do it because you're passionate about what you do. And whether you're training 300 days of the year in the rain in Victoria during the winter, you're not doing it because you want to get on TV. You're doing it because you actually like the process of waking up every day, seeing your teammates, going down to the lake, pushing yourself day after day after day, getting better, going overseas, competing for Canada, seeing where you rank against the rest of the world. And the Olympics is a bit the cherry on top, but for most athletes, it's the lifestyle that they are addicted to and that they really love. And the competitions are the bonus after all that hard work. So I don't think there's any grieving about not being in the spotlight. We're not, NBA basketball players. We're not the NHL hockey players. We never will be. And that's okay. And the one thing that's great about the Olympics is that all these athletes descend on a city at the same time. And when you're in the Olympic Village, you're just Olympic athletes. So you're walking by Roger Federer, you might bump into Nadal, you might bump into some NBA players. You sit down for lunch one day at the McDonald's and Serena Williams is there and you have a little chat with her. And so it's all pretty cool because you're just at the Olympics and everyone is there together. And that's what makes it so special.
And there's that common respect amongst all of you as athletes, regardless of the sport or the celebrity status each of you may have in your home country.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the transition from Olympian to retiree. Something I've often been a bit fascinated by, and I can't imagine it's an easy move. And in fact, Doug, I came across an article you wrote, I think back in 2016, where you outlined how unexpectedly difficult the transition was for you. Can you explain a little bit about what you went through and why you found it so hard?
I found it challenging because even though I was ready for retirement and I had prepared myself for it, it's challenging for many reasons. One of them is because you're sort of mourning the loss of an identity, which you're no longer that person, and that identity is really strong, and it's how people see you, and it's how you see yourself. So you have to sort of put that on the shelf and say, chapters closed, move on. But like with any process, there's a mourning process that goes a bit of a grieving process. It's almost like a death, and as difficult as it is, you have to keep reminding yourself that time will help heal that and help that transition be easier. It's also difficult, I think, because you're used to training, at least in rowing, 6 hours a day. And so as exhausted as you are, you're pumping yourself full of these endorphins 6 hours a day. And no matter what happens after, how fit you try to stay after, there's no way that you can recreate that intensity of training 6 hours a day. And so you always feel, because your expectations are so high, and they are as athletes, because that's why you are an athlete, you're always going to fall short of that expectation of trying to stay fit and stuff like that. And so, it can take various amounts of time. For me, it took maybe a couple of years. But once you pass that, then you look back more on it with with great fondness and great memories, and your body has adjusted to the changes that physically and psychologically you've had to go through, and then you sort of come out the other side. And it's different for every athlete, and every athlete taps into different resources that they need to get through it. But I think that's sort of like a general way to sort of encapsulate the feeling. I mean, Jeannie can probably add more to it, but she might agree.
Yeah, yeah, I know, Jeannie, in your case, it was a bit of a more, I guess, more of an abrupt end to your Olympic career, right? Because you were expecting to compete a second time in 2012, but were sidelined by an injury. So, how did that play out for you? Did you recognize at the time that your Olympic career was coming to an end, and how did you cope with all of that compounded?
Yeah, I actually like have a very strange Olympic trajectory. Like I did move to Quebec to make the 2000 Olympic team, and I was an alternate for that, and got injured just before the games then, but took some time away from the sport, came back for the 2004 games, was an alternate, much happier about it because it was like unexpected. And then finally did go to the games in 2008, thought I was done, started teaching elementary school, and then went to the Canada Games in 2011 and got very inspired by Team Yukon, the women's hockey team that I was supporting. We had all of these coaches come in and talk to them. Like they had 28 girls try out, and they're playing against, Quebec that has 5,000 girls, so major underdogs. We had Melody Davidson come in and talk to the girls, Danielle Sauvageau, and the things they were saying was just like, man, this is what sport's about. Like the message was, one day there's going to be a Yukon kid on the national hockey team, and it might not be you, but you can look in the mirror and know you were a part of building that. And yes, you're getting slaughtered 100 shots to 2, but this means something. This is what sport's about. And like it moved me so much that I was like, yeah, I gotta try for the Olympics again and go back and go to the opening ceremonies. And so those kids that I teach gym to can watch me on the TV and be like, hey, that's my teacher. I know her. Like she taught me how to throw. And knowing that maybe that's what they will be able to do one day, whether they ever get to the Olympics or not, that's not the important thing. But the fact they're willing to try things because they know it's a possibility that things may pan out in that way. That's what kind of made me go, okay, I'm going to try for the 2012 games. And that meant I had to turn around and go to the Western Canada Championships immediately after and do all of the steps And I did do those things. I qualified for the Olympics, and unfortunately, 5 days later, I herniated a disc lifting like half of what I had lifted a week prior to qualify. So I did know it was over right there. I was actually training in Victoria at the Sport Institute there, and I was on the floor crying because I knew it was over. And the head of the strength and conditioning team for all sports, you might know him, Tyler Goodell.
Yeah, yeah. We
He,
might have met before.
yeah, I think we did train together in Victoria.
Yeah.
So yeah, he said, Jeannie, don't cry. I'll give you a job. And I was like, don't look at me. I was just embarrassed. I needed help taking off my shoes. Like it was a horrible moment. But he said like, oh, you can be the sports school teacher, like coach for weightlifting, which this sports school program I had noticed when I first went down to Victoria in 2011 to train. And I had been lobbying the Yukon government right from day one of being in Victoria to kind of plagiarize this program with the blessing of the Sport Institute. I was like, we can make this happen. The Yukon government had wanted to do a sports school since the 2000, and they couldn't find a format to agree on, right, that would please all sports. And it was like, it should be cross-country skiing. That's what we're good at. It should be basketball. That's accessible to everyone. No one could agree. And this Sport Institute actually had created this program based on all these national athletes that were going to the Olympics trying to win golds but couldn't like touch their toes or do a proper squat or didn't have the athleticism because they were so sport specific. So they created this program that was based on Olympic weightlifting, gymnastics, and sprinting, and like getting those mechanics down so that you could take those skills and transfer them to other sports. So yeah, I was lobbying. And then when I got into the position to actually work as the sports school teacher, I had a much better voice. So being an Olympian and having taught in the program, we were able to finally make the leap to start in the program here in Whitehorse in 2013. So that back injury sucks, and I still suffer. I can't run any length because of compression. Like I have to be very specific about what kind of activity I can do because I have a herniated disc and two bulge discs. But it is the gift that allowed me to, instead of compete, coach Christine Girard at the Olympics in 2012, start that sports school program, which has been going strong for 11 years now. We bring kids in from all across the Yukon. It's a really great way for kids from small communities to come into Whitehorse and because it's treated like a trade, there's 15 kids in a class or less. They have a half a day with kids that they know, rather than if you're coming from Old Crow where there's 200 people and it's a fly-in only. And you go to high school here where there's twice that many people. It's really overwhelming. So sports school has helped so many kids get through high school in a safe way. And I mean, that's not even talking about the actual athleticism that helps create. So I think that really helped for me for the transition from athlete to civilian. I think what keeps me, it's hard not to have regrets and think about like, man, if only the internet existed when I was a teenager, I could have learned all these things and avoided all this pain just by having access to sports science and understanding nutrition. That's a whole other rabbit hole. I can't imagine being a young teenage athlete with TikTok. It would be very hard to get the required amount of sleep to perform. But just running into these kiddos in the grocery store and them telling me like what they've done because of getting involved in sports school, and that has helped me get through. And I'm very grateful that the Sport Institute was willing to share their hard-earned intellectual property and support a small community up here in the way that they have. So,
oh, what a great story! Thanks for sharing that. So you literally picked yourself off the ground, or maybe had someone pick you up off the ground and sort of built it up. That's wonderful.
A side note about Tyler, you mentioned I rode with him in Montreal way back. So.
No way.
All connected. Circle. Yeah, full circle.
Shout out Tyler.
I meant to ask before we went live if you guys even know each other through the Olympics.
No, not at the Olympics, but I mean, from you talking, it sounds like we probably were in the gym together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
In Victoria at Pisces.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, definitely recognize you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went with Julian from rowing to the games in 2018 as athlete mentor. So.
Oh, right. You were with Jeane.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's what I want to talk about next. Actually, is sort of your post-Olympic career with the Canadian Olympic Committee, and I noticed that in both of your cases, and maybe this is usual for retired athletes, maybe not. I'm not sure, but it seems like the COC welcomed both of you back into the fold after your retirements. Jeannie, you just mentioned you were a coach at the 2012 Games and an athlete mentor at the Winter Olympics in 2018 in Pyeongchang, and Douglas, you served as an athletic services officer at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. So I'm wondering, what did these roles entail, and how significant was it for each of you to be able to give back to the next generation of Canadian Olympians? Douglas, you want to start with that one?
I think it's important because it also helps with that transition out of sport and sort of still staying connected to your community, but giving back in a meaningful way because a lot of work, the amount of work that happens behind the scenes so that everything is smooth, and Canada is very good at that on the world stage. If you see other athletes who see our a little contingent in the Olympic villages, and Canada goes above and beyond to make things uh, smooth and comfortable for the athletes and make everything feel like home, but so that it's all familiar, which is part of performing at your best, is having like a bit of continuity. And so I think it is part of giving back, and it's a great feeling to help the next generation. And for me, when I went over to Russia, I like to cook, and I went to cooking school after I was finished with rowing, and I was just sort of managing the lounge with the athletes lounge, which is just for athletes in the Olympic Village, just for the Canadian athletes. But because I was trying to make things comfortable for the athletes, I said, there's all we have is microwaves, but the dietitian would come every day and say, what do we need? And I'd send her out, and I'd say, okay, can you get me this list of ingredients? And she'd come back. And then so with just a couple of microwaves, I was making, chocolate chip banana bread, potato cheese scones, like all sorts of stuff. And it became, of course, that drive as an athlete trying to get better. I was trying to make these like little delicacies better and better. How can I make chocolate cake with cream cheese icing in a microwave and stuff like that? And the smells would waft through the hallways. And it was really funny to see these Canadians sort of, they'd be putting orders in the night before saying, okay, downhill skiing, it's the whatever, my race tomorrow. Can I have this tomorrow morning? I need it at 6:15 and stuff like that. And so it was just giving back in my own little way, sort of crafting what I could do to give back with the skills that I knew to make things more familiar and comfortable for the athletes. And so it was quite fun. And everyone has their little stories. That was mine. And it was the same thing when I was down in Lima with the as the chef de mission for the Canadian contingent there. It's, you have these Canadians, and a lot of them are young. And, it's at the Pan Am Games, it was the first big competition, and, you're in South America for the first time. And so you just do little things to try to make things as comfortable for the athletes as possible. And sometimes it's just giving these scared looking athletes a hug and saying, it's going to be okay. We're all here together, and we're here to support whatever you need, just come out and say it. So it is quite a nice feeling to be able to give back in that way.
Great. Oh, wow. And so, Jeannie, is that similar to your experience as an athletic
Well,
services officer
I'm
or
laughing because,
mentor?
yeah, I think athlete service officer and athlete mentor are the same. I think they just changed the title of the role. So, yeah, I was also in the athlete lounge. And what's really cool about that lounge is it's like the great equalizer, right? Doesn't matter. There's no pictures of the medal count in the athlete lounge. At least there wasn't the year we did it. I don't know if it was that way for you, but yeah, so everyone's kind of like in grandma and grandpa's living room, right? All equal. It doesn't matter who's winning a gold and who didn't finish, right? It's just nothing but support and unconditional, warmth from one athlete to another. And I'm laughing because the only thing I ever made for the athletes was Valentine's Day was during the Olympics, and I think I made open faced peanut butter and honey sandwiches with hearts on it.
Sounds good.
And for the opening ceremonies for all of us who stayed behind, I got like a giant bowl full of the classic apple pies from McDonald's. So I feel like those athletes that were in Sochi and then showed up and Pyeongchang were probably like, what is this? But anyways, I think what was really good for me was growing up in the Yukon. I got to go to the Arctic Winter Games, which is a multi-sport game for the Circumpolar North, and as early as 2002, I got to go, like just a 21-year-old. I got to go as a mission staff to that in Greenland, and I got to see what goes into being like. I understood a little bit of what happens when you stay in Canada for multi-sport games and what kind of organization that took and volunteerism. But when I saw it happening internationally in Greenland, in a place where we didn't know the language and there was such cultural differences, it really opened my eyes to what goes into bringing a team overseas. And so I kind of started connecting more with mission staff when I would go to multi-sport games because of that. Like I just had different questions that I would have asked because of some experience. And that Canada Games in 2011, I want to come back to that, going with the women's hockey team, because it was what made me see just how connected everything is. There was a moment where we were in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, and Team Yukon was playing against Nova Scotia, and they were losing 11-0, which was pretty good for Team Yukon. But what was really cool about that is Jeane Kingsbury, who was a gold medalist in hockey, has been an athlete service officer, someone who's very engaged in giving back. She was there as part of an athlete mentor program for Canada Games. And because I knew how the system worked, I was like, Gina, please come coach for one period, just one period, come sit on the bench with these gals. It would be amazing. And so she did. And in that last period, the last 20 seconds, the Yukon scored. And it was the first time they scored in the whole tournament. I think it was the first time they'd ever scored in Canada Games history. And like the bench went crazy, even Nova Scotia's bench went crazy. Jeane Kingsbury was crying with every athlete on the bench. And it was like, it gives me goosebumps talking about it still. But it was just like that connection. Like that's what made me come back to train for the 2012 games. And that's what connected me to Christine Girard's story. And then Christine Girard wins a medal at the 2012 games where Jeane Kingsbury is. And then Jeane Kingsbury is at the 2018 games as the manager for the hockey team. And, she had an impact on a medal in a different sport that because of her willingness to give back and like connect, it's just so much bigger than any one thing, right? Like that's what's cool about the sport community. Like we have, like you said, Douglas, that doesn't matter what sport, what country, we all have this shared experience and like hope for each other, if that makes sense. And like there's the girl that scored that goal in 2011, anytime the PWHL is on and one of the girls, like I think Blair Turnbull was in that game, like I'm like, oh my God, that girl that was on the ice when you scored, she's the captain of Toronto's hockey team. Like it's just, it like goes so far and it like, it's injected energy into our hockey league here in Whitehorse. And it's just so cool to see like what a couple of moments can do and have such a rippling effect.
Wow. So I know we've had a wonderful conversation so far, and it's been very sort of lighthearted and nostalgic. There was one issue I did want to address, a more serious issue that has reared its head again ahead of these Olympics, which I was sort of hoping to get a little bit of perspective from each of you on, if you're willing, and that's the question of doping. So given just as background, there are some recent allegations that came out that Chinese authorities may have turned a blind eye to banned substances that turned up in nearly 24 of its swimmers before the 2021 games in Tokyo. There was recent testimony by American swimmer Michael Phelps to the U.S. Congress that anti-doping policies are coming up short. So I'm wondering what each of you make of the current efforts to ensure that the athletes are competing clean, and how concerned should fans and the sporting community be about the current state of doping among some Olympic athletes? Brave volunteers want to take that one on?
I think cheating is a part of human nature, and some of us do it and some of us don't. And it's all the authorities who are trying to keep it clean are always two steps behind the cheaters, and that's an unfortunate part of sport, but it's a reality. And so we need strong institutions that can govern that aspect of the sport to make sure it's clean, because it's not fun at all to compete against people who cheat. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeannie, but Some sports are worse than others, but it's also some countries are worse than others, and some countries, you know, there are cheaters in Canada, but it's not endorsed by the government. And whereas there are some countries where the cheating is starts at the highest level, whether it's, like, we all know who they are. And one of the other problems with, I think, um, the doping, the agencies that test the athletes when they're in their home country is that it's done by the home country. So it's a bit of a catch-22 because it's sort of like, yes, they're trying to test the athletes, but it's the people who are doping that are then testing the doping. And so obviously some changes need to be made, but it's hard to make those changes and have the whole globe get on board. And so those are the challenges that sport present, and it's about uh, talking about it, not shying away from the challenges, and to confront it head on and not be scared who you're going to offend, because at the end of the day, all you need is one cheater, and it just ruins it for everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think the trickiest thing is like Canada, we have, athletes' whereabouts. Doping control is truly doping control. If you test positive, there's going to be consequences. Whereas in other countries, it's not so much doping control as controlled doping and making sure that athletes are ready to attend international competitions with a negative test. And that is really frustrating. And weightlifting is one of the sports that has a very bad reputation for good reason, unfortunately. I think one of the reasons that it's so widespread is partly because of the accessibility of the sport. We have um, so many countries participating with so many different value systems, so many different realities. I'm currently a counselor, and so spend a lot of time in mental health and wellness, and talk about a lot of barriers and trauma. And for a lot of athletes, this is a way out. It's like you take drugs or you don't compete. For some athletes, that's just how it is. It's so entirely different from our value system in Canada. It's very hard to imagine. But for some athletes, it's not like a personal decision. It's institutional. It's the team is this is part of what it takes to get out and compete for your country. So understanding that it's something larger than certain individuals. Like, we are so blessed to be Canadian and have choice, and to live in the country we live in and have the support system we have and healthcare and all of the things. And it's really hard to imagine living in a different reality, right? So I try, I know that athletes I competed against were doping and didn't get caught, and I know that weightlifting is so tricky. I came 8th at the Olympics in Beijing, and with retesting, I moved up to 5th, and they stopped retesting because time ran out. So, and I know that 4 people in front of me, some of them, their whole team tested positive, but they didn't get retested. So that's a hard reality, right? Very hard reality. That said, like Douglas said earlier, we compete because we love the lifestyle, we love pushing ourselves, and we love knowing that we're doing it in our own values. So I've never watched Icarus because everyone talks about it, and I'm like, that was my sport career, and it makes me mad, and I can't. Like, this is a truth I already knew, and I don't need to rewatch it with everyone else now, because I've come to peace with, I like who I am, I like the place I live, I like how I live, how I did my career. I'm happy with it, right? I don't have that what if I was able to do what they did, what then, who would be the truly better athlete. I know I gave everything I have. That's how I accept it. I'm happy to hear that people are still fighting. Like Christine Gerard, she came 3rd in 2012. Same thing with the retests. It turned to gold. She got her medal on the podium in 2018. Never got to Hero Canada. Never got the sponsorship that may have come, the opportunities that may have come with getting gold in real time. But still, like, doing everything we can to keep things fair, while still enjoying the process of being an athlete and competing with values true to yourself and true to our country.
Wow. Well said, both of you. I appreciate the frank comments and perspectives. So we're just about out of time. Maybe I'll just throw one last question out at each of you. And that's basically, as you look back on your remarkable athletic careers, both as Olympians and as sort of post-Olympians. I'm curious as to how these experiences around the Olympics may have shaped your personal and professional lives since your retirements as you moved on to the next chapters of your life. So, Doug, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you're up to these days at your home in Vancouver, and what do you attribute your current success? How do you contribute? How do you attribute the Olympic experience to your current success and happiness?
Yeah, well, I don't know what comes first, whether it's the your experiences shape your outlook, or it's your outlook sort of shapes your experiences, sort of thing. And there's definitely a certain mindset that athletes have, but because we're humans, you take a bunch of rowers or a bunch of weightlifters, and you have the what would be characterized as the hard workers, the lazy ones, the ones that want to sleep in, the one that want to. So it doesn't matter. We're not all the same, right? We're all just human, and we have different characteristics and stuff. But the what I like about the Olympic movement and sport is that, it's about hard work, it's about perseverance, it's about not seeing instant gratification right away. It's about having to be patient and seeing the rewards that might come 10 years down the road. And the reason you do it is because of the passion that you have. So I always I tell my kids, I tell the kids that I coach, that I come into contact at schools with, I'm like, you find something you love to do, and it doesn't have to be sport, but you find something you love to do, and you're going to do it a lot. And doing it a lot is going to make you better at it. And that is what passion is called. And so the only way to get good at something is to do it a lot. And so you better find something that you love to do. And that sounds, for me, it sounds like common sense, but it's sometimes really hard in our culture and in our society, because we're told to do what our parents do. We're told to do, this is the only thing that I'm allowed to be because that's what my parents want me to be. And so, I've had quite frank conversations with people who are like, yeah, I really like what you said, but I can't do it. It's not, and that sort of is heartbreaking in a way, because I was given a space where I was able to do that. And people would say, in my circle, like, how come you say to my parents in front of me, when's he going to stop doing this ridiculous stuff? Right? Like, he's got to grow up? And my parents are like, thankfully, my parents said, leave him alone. You know, he's working hard at something. What else do you want in life? When you see your kids working hard at something, that you can't ask for anything more. When you see them enjoying something in life, you can't ask for anything more. And so that's when I say, an Olympic movement. It doesn't have to be the Olympics. It could be, you're passionate about being a teacher, and you really want to go to teachers college, and you have all these great ideas to share with kids. Go for it. Do it, right? Be Olympic, in the sense that persevere, work hard, love what you do. That's what it all means. And so today, I'm I'm a stay-at-home dad. I like to say the first thing I do is I'm a stay-at-home dad with a lot of things on the side. But parenting is can be characterized as an Olympic movement, because you need the energy to raise kids, right? So that's where a lot of my energies right now are focused, and I love to write, and so a little plug, go. Here's, my first book, Salmon on Toast. My second book, I Hate Bouillabaisse, also in French. This is the French one. Je déteste la bouillabaisse. Here's the English version. I hate bouillabaisse, right? So it's, you know, it's about doing what you love and going for it, right? And all the stuff that society worries about, like money, power, all that stuff. That stuff is not the important stuff, even though we need money to live. You need to pay the mortgage. You need to pay the rent. You need to feed. Obviously it's important, but a lot of that, but the priority has to be on the thing that you're doing, not on the other stuff, because the other stuff usually sometimes come anyways, whether you like it or not. And you better watch what you wish for, in a way, because if you're wishing for the wrong thing, that might not actually be what you want to do. So that's the way I look at it. I Jeannie may or may think the same thing, but I'm sure she sounds like a passionate person, and it sounds like a lot of the things she's done have been out of passion as well. And so I'll hand it over to Jeannie and let her finish off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead,
well,
Jeane.
thanks. I do agree, like that it is all about being passionate and finding something to engage with. And I think what being an Olympian has allowed me is a voice here in the North. We're really lucky in the Yukon. We have roads to all of our communities but one. And as an athlete, I've been able to go to all 14 rural communities and connect with youth and First Nations organizations and kind of share my story. And it's really a way to empower others to share their stories. So I'm not going to try to get into this whole origin story now, but I will tell you something that I share with kids a lot is a story about when I was about 15, and after dinner one night I burped, and I thought it was, a good one, like a good 8.5 at least. And my dad didn't laugh. He got really mad and he said, you have horrible manners. You're an embarrassment to our family. One day you're going to eat with the queen, and what then? You don't even know what to hold your knife and fork, and you get the hands wrong all the time and elbows on the table. He just went off, right? And I was like, eat dinner with the queen. Like, I live in a trailer court in the Yukon. Why would I ever eat dinner with the queen? I rolled my eyes, and like I was already on the national team at that point. I wanted to go to the Olympics, but I didn't see myself as one of those people we see on the Olympians reel, right? Like I didn't have a pile of ribbons. I didn't do gymnastics when I was 4. I didn't know how to swim really. I didn't do organized sport of any kind until grade 5 when I did white horse minor soccer because it was affordable. And so like it just didn't feel like that was going to be me. I didn't fit the white bread story with the picket fence and the trophies and all of it. So I couldn't see myself in that because I thought it was for other people. Like my first sport, I always tell kids, is my first sport was stacking wood. Like that was my original training plan, right? But fast forward 10 years after that infamous burp, I went to the Commonwealth Games in 2006 and I won a gold medal and got Commonwealth records. And I was invited to eat dinner lunch with the Queen, right? And I was asked out of the whole Team Canada. It was me and one other athlete. I think we were 300 odd athletes, and I got the invite. And it was like a weird time change difference between Melbourne and Whitehorse. So instead of interviewing me, CBC North interviewed my dad. And my dad was on the radio and they were asking him about my performance. And he was like, I told her I was right. I told her all these years ago, one day she'd eat with the Queen, and she just rolled her eyes. But I was right. And they were like trying to redirect him, like, hey, Mr. Lassen, like, can you please just talk about how much she lifted and what that looks like and what it felt like to watch online? And he just kept bringing it back to being right. So I didn't hear the interview, but my friends were like, my God, your dad's such a jerk. Like, can he just like talk about your weightlifting? He's so not into it because he just never got super passionate about the weightlifting the way my mom did. But so I kind of confronted him. I was like, Dad, come on, man. I was like, Commonwealth record, like, because he'd always be like, well, you missed your last attempt. That would be his kind of way to rib me. But he's like, look, I knew you could do it. It doesn't matter where you're from. People can beat people. Like, yeah, statistically, 300 some odd athletes on the team. How many are from Quebec and Ontario? 80%. More likely someone from those places are going to be the person invited to dinner with the Queen. But you as an individual, one of 336 or whatever it is, have just as much chance as that other person that's one out of 336. So like, mind blown, like, you're right. Like, Dad, you're actually pretty wise. So that's kind of the message I go and share with kids. And like, these are tiny remote communities where, the staff at the school, it's turnover. People can't handle the remote life. They see the Yukon on the internet and they sign up for teaching jobs, and then it's like hard to get through a full school year. So you got someone that starts out the year guns a-blazing. I'm a badminton coach and we're going to have a badminton program, or it's judo time or whatever. And the kids have to like get engaged, knowing that it might not make it past Christmas, like the sport itself might fall. But so I go there and I say, like, I know, like, this happens, it changes, and you never know what the teacher coming in is going to be into. And like lacrosse might be only around for half a year or 2, but you got to try it. Like, be willing to try, because stacking wood, going hard, doing it quickly, like that pays off into something, right? Like I never would have picked weightlifting. I feel like it chose me. I did not choose weightlifting, but it happened to be an opportunity. Would I rather have gone to the Olympics for a different sport? Probably. It would have been a lot cooler to be part of a team, like a hockey team or something, but that wasn't an option. And I mean, who knows if I could ever have made it in a different sport. I was just in the right place at the right time and willing to do the work and willing to, like I said, pick up garbage roadside so that I could fundraise. But that opportunity to connect for me, it's like, yeah, like the cherry on top. It's people say that going to the Olympics is like the icing on the cake, but cake's not very good without icing. So I don't think I don't think the Olympics is the icing. I think maybe the icing is the meaning you take out of all of your experiences, and getting to the Olympics is like the sprinkles or the cherry. It's the bling, and it's awesome. It's so awesome, and it's the pull through for kids. It's what keeps us engaged. But yeah, it's definitely the journey that is the reward. And I think Team Denmark had that on their shirts in 2008 in Beijing, and I remember seeing that on day one, being like, "That's a little early to say that," but it's true. It really is.
Wow, wonderful. Very well said, both of you. So this feels like a really good place maybe to end the conversation on this very high note. So before we close, I would like to extend my deep gratitude to our two McGill graduates who joined us today, Douglas Vandor and Jeane Lassen, who shared incredible stories reflecting back on their Olympic careers and some sort of inner inside secrets as well. So that's wonderful. And thank you to our audience of McGill alumni and friends for tuning in and helping us all get ready for the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. Please continue to stay tuned to your McGill email and social media feeds for more updates on exciting online and in-person programming. And until then, please be well, stay safe, and go Canada, go.
Go
Thank you.
Canada, go. Yeah,
Okay,
thanks a lot.
thank you.